Good morning, everyone. Pat Healy here from the Laker News. I'm interviewing the planning and development staff with the Municipality of East Hants about two upcoming proposals for the Enfield area. So it's Debbie Eulith and John Woodford, and Jody MacArthur is here too as the communications person. To start, let's get a summary of the two main developments in Enfield that are being proposed, Catherine Street and Curley's.
Sure. So the development at 450 Highway 2, where the Curley's property is, in Enfield, is an application by W.M. Ferris Architects on behalf of Monk Mobile Corporation Limited and Allison Land Surveys Limited. And that application is for an amendment to our municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw, mapping amendments to change the designation and zone to walkable comprehensive development district, and to enter into a development agreement to allow for 2 large multiplexes and 1 mixed-use building and townhouses with the extension of Lacey Ann Avenue down to Highway 2. And it was originally submitted in May of 2019, and it has changed a little since its initial submission in May of 2019. The second application is a recent application. So that was just submitted this May of 2021. So just this May of 2021. Council hasn't had a chance to take a look at this application yet. It will be brought forward to our Planning Advisory Committee on May 18th. And that application is by Catherine Street Investments, and they're applying to change the land use designation and zone to mixed use center, which would allow them then to apply for a development agreement to allow for 2 buildings, both 6 stories, and on-street townhouses, and for a total of 168 dwelling units. And as I said, that one's at the very initial stages, whereas the W.M. Ferris Architects one has been ongoing since May of 2019, for about 2 years now.
All right. The residents, anything to add, John?
No, I think Debbie summarized it well.
Okay. The residents of this area have started a sign and petition campaign against developments in Enfield, specifically these two, saying there's concerns around traffic, infrastructure, and that they just don't fit. Any comments on that?
Yeah. Maybe I'll start, and then Debbie, you sort of fill in any gaps I leave. I mean, we always ask these questions with any application. The thing staff are always concerned with are things like, can our existing infrastructure, whether that's sewer, water, storm drainage, roads, can our existing infrastructure accommodate the development, or are there any improvements needed to that infrastructure? So those questions get asked with every development, and they were certainly asked with the W.M. Ferris application, and they will be asked with the Catherine Street one. As for it just not fitting, well, that's in both cases, the applications are to amend the municipal planning strategy. So that's a really good question. Actually, do they fit? Should we change the plan? And that's a question that council will have to wrestle with. Yeah, Debbie, anything else on those?
Yeah, so in regards to the traffic impact analysis, because both of these developments will use either municipally owned streets or provincial streets. For example, W.M. Ferris Architects, they have been required to complete a traffic impact study. And so that study is complete, and it's with the Nova Scotia Department of Transportation and Active Transit for review. And once that review is complete, that traffic impact study will be made available to our council for their review, in addition to review by staff, and ultimately be made available to the public as well. So that will be made available. And the Catherine Street Investments application, that's at the very initial stage. So we haven't had a chance to even consult with our reviewing agencies yet. And so there may be another traffic impact study that's related to that one, or it really depends on what our engineers say in regards to traffic impact, and the Nova Scotia Department of Transportation and Active Transit, what their comments are on the application. In regards to, for example, water capacity, I know that our engineers keep track of all development and understand what our capacity is in regards to water, and keep a running tally of the development that's taking place to make sure that we're not going above and beyond. And I believe there are projects underway to look at water capacity and sewer capacity. Is that correct, John?
Yeah.
So neither one of these proposals are a done deal.
No.
I guess that's the main point that we want to share with the residents in the area and in the municipality is this is our process. You know, they're at different stages of the process, yes. But, you know, it ultimately will be up to council once they get all of the information that's needed to make a decision.
Yes.
So what's the process like? Now, walk us through what the process is involved in a proposed development application. Some of us who've been covering this understand and know, but for those who don't. So,
sure. So, I mean, it almost always starts months before, you know, there's an actual application in that. Usually developers are looking for places to do developments, and they'll quite often contact planning staff to find out what existing zoning is, what would be permitted under that existing zoning, and what would be required if they wanted to do something different or larger. And I'm pretty sure in both of these cases, we had conversations with property owners or developers before an application. Once an application is submitted, staff pretty quickly take an initial report to Planning Advisory Committee, basically letting them know that we've received the application. We haven't done any analysis on it or formed an opinion about it, but we have an application, so we bring that to them. And then if there's an MPS amendment, which would be the case of a municipal planning strategy amendment for the application, a public information meeting would be required. So that's just where we, again, very early in the process want to share the fact that we received an application with the surrounding community. So, you know, we use our website and social media to get that information out. We send a letter to everybody that owns property within 300 meters to try to widely distribute the information about an application. And then following the public information meeting, we start our consultation, or around the same time we start our consultation with a number of reviewing agencies, so Provincial Department of Transportation, a number of internal departments like Parks and Rec and Infrastructure and Operations, and occasionally other provincial or other organizations as well. We work through that. We look at council's planning policy, and eventually staff will form an opinion on whether it constitutes good planning and is consistent with council's planning strategy. There are a couple other steps in there, like you need to give initial consideration or first reading, depending on what it is. And then a public hearing is set where we again sort of distribute the information about that public hearing widely through ads and letters. And then staff would present their conclusion, I guess, about that development and how it might fit the plan and how all the technical issues are dealt with in terms of traffic and servicing and so on. And then council needs to consider what they've heard from their staff, reviewing agencies, and the public. So that's kind of the final step there in terms of the public hearing, that they get to hear directly from the public what they think of an application, how it might fit council's policies. And then ultimately a decision is made on whether to approve it or not. So I think I've covered all the steps, unless Debbie can think of one I've missed there.
No, I think you have it.
No, okay.
Okay, many in the community feel that these two proposed applications for the development will be approved by council. Are residents' voices and concerns heard during this proposal application process?
Absolutely. I'm actually surprised sometimes by the cynicism, and there's a lot of cynicism about, you know, stuff's already decided beforehand, or, you know, those kinds of things that you hear. Well, I can tell you that, no, what the public think matters a lot. Although it, you know, and what I would tell people though is that what really matters is not so much the number of people that are for or against something, but the arguments for or against. It's really important to look at the planning strategy and see, well, does this actually fit, and why does it or doesn't it? If, you know, you're opposed to something, those are the things you should concentrate on. And likewise, those that support development should also not just say they like it because they like it, but why and how it relates to the planning policy, because that's the way we make our decisions, and ultimately that's the decision basis for council.
One of these developments, it's my understanding, is just a change for MPS. So if council says no, it cannot be appealed. Is that correct?
Basically, both developments require MPS and municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw mapping amendments. So the mapping amendment portion of the applications cannot be appealed to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board, but they also involve development agreements. So the mapping amendments allow the development agreements to take place, and the development agreements portion of it can be appealed to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. So for example, if council approved the mapping amendments, but then didn't approve the development agreement at that point in time, they could go to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board. But if they said no to both, then to the MPS amendment, then they couldn't appeal it.
Okay.
And
cool.
Sorry, development agreements, they're really important, right? From our perspective. Why is that, Debbie?
So development agreements are extremely important. From our perspective, because it's a contract between the municipality and the developer about how the site is going to be developed. For example, under our current zoning regulations, one of the properties could be developed with apartment buildings already as of right. So that could be done as of right, but we have minimum zone requirements, so minimum setbacks from the property line, minimum height and such, but it doesn't say how that development is going to look. Whereas with the development agreement, what we can do is have a site plan and the community knows what that development is going to look like in the end. It also allows us to negotiate for items such as open space. It allows us to negotiate for commercial space. For example, the WM Fairs Architects application. It has commercial space on the ground floor, which the municipality is important to the municipality having commercial space. And whereas as a right development, they don't necessarily have to have the commercial space. They're capable of having it, but they don't have to have it as part of the development. Also, we can require some of the design of the buildings to be considered in the development agreement, whereas in the as of right, they just have to meet the minimum requirements. So it's a give and take process. We negotiate with the developer to do a development that we think is good for the neighborhood, and not that the as of right isn't good for the neighborhood, but it just gives us a better idea of what the final development is going to be like.
Yeah, especially with larger developments, where you may want to talk about design in more depth than you do with a smaller development, and where you're looking for better public benefits, whether it's public open space or some other things. That it's just a great tool to use to enable that negotiation to happen.
Yeah, and the other thing I should mention with the development agreement is once that development agreement is registered with the land, it doesn't matter if the developer sells the land or not, that development agreement stays with the property. It doesn't matter who owns the property. And if there's a change to that development agreement that's considered a substantive change to the development agreement, then they would have to come back to council and ask for that development agreement to be renegotiated or ask for that change within that development agreement.
All right. 6 stories seems big for Enfield. Is that normal to be asked for this area?
Go ahead, Debbie.
Okay, so it's true. We haven't had many applications for 6-story buildings, but with the applications that were recently approved for Armco Capital Inc. and the Shaw Group and Lance and the developments in Elmsdale, there has been some precedent setting for having higher density development. In addition, in Enfield, we do have the mixed use center zone, and that allows for 4 stories as of right. And one of the objectives of our planning documents is to kind of develop for transit-oriented development and to bring the density towards Highway 2 and to create the density nodes along Highway 2 in the mixed-use center, and then in other areas. So by bringing the density and allowing for higher buildings, we can hopefully kind of increase our density along Highway 2, allow for better transit, allow better pedestrian connectivity, and not have the development at the rear of the subdivisions, which would increase traffic going through the actual subdivision itself.
Could
John,
okay,
further
sorry.
to say?
Go, John.
Sorry.
Do you have anything further?
No, that's good, I think. Yeah, it's and again, coming back to the development agreements, so multi-unit buildings are either, depending on the zone, limited to 3 or 4 stories. And again, once we get into a development agreement, that's why we left that threshold there, so that if people want to go to 5 or 6 stories, we can now talk about other benefits or more detailed design work for that property. Not that 5 or 6 stories in and of themselves are necessarily bad or a problem.
Yeah.
And potentially some, really good commercial services at the bottom of the buildings as well that can benefit the tenants and the residents in the surrounding area.
Yeah, that's actually why when we created the mixed use center zone, which has only been around since 2016, you're allowed 3 stories as of right, but if you provide commercial on the ground floor, that gives you an extra story because we want that mixed use development. Yeah. And to provide more local services within communities.
And with the WM Fairs applications, I should note that these buildings are proposed to be at ground level so that you won't have that a little bit kind of popping out of the ground. So even though there's 6 stories, the overall height of the building may not feel as high as some of the extremely tall because they're going to be at ground level. You won't have that 8 to 10 feet that's popping out for the underground parking because we require them to be at ground level. In addition, the type of construction also allows the building to be not to feel as tall, because if it's concrete construction, which these buildings most likely will be, they don't need as much space as they would with the wood construction, because wood construction, you need a taller building in order to accommodate each of the floors, whereas the concrete, you don't.
And with these developments, could that lead to better traffic stuff like crosswalks that are desperately needed and been asked for years, especially at the Avery's area?
Hopefully that would be an eventual outcome. Yeah, that would be a great outcome.
So again, when all these developments are proposed, there's usually a traffic impact statement or study. One's just more detailed than the other that take place. And those studies they never say yes or no to a development. What they say is, to accommodate the traffic from this development, here are the things that need to happen. You need a dedicated left turn lane, you need a signalized intersection or a crosswalk, whatever. So coming out of those things, you should, see what's actually required to enable the development. But ultimately, the municipality doesn't have total control here, because most of these roads we're talking about are actually owned by the province. So, the traffic studies for these 2 applications are going to the Provincial Department of Transportation. They will say, we agree with the findings, or we don't, or change this or that. And then they will accept the changes to the road if there are any required. So, again, we share our thoughts, a municipal perspective, and we certainly, and I know council feels strongly about crosswalks as well, but ultimately we can't install them unless the province agrees to them.
That's correct, yes.
And we've heard loud and clear from residents that that some changes do need to be made there. Yeah, at the bottom of White Road in particular, not just around vehicular traffic, but also safety as well for people coming and going from that area. So we hear you.
Yes.
So what's your message to residents with concerns that, like I said earlier, think that the decision's already a slam dunk and their concerns don't matter? What's your message to keep the concerns coming in?
It's pretty straightforward. It's to pay attention to the process, to interact with the process. So absolutely, people are writing to their counselors. I see that now. Inform yourself. There are staff reports, like all our staff reports now we post online. They're all available. And all our meetings are also, after they take place, if you missed it, you can go back and watch the video to see the discussion. So certainly pay attention, interact, and You know, the decisions have not been made on either of these applications. It is I think, a pretty open process. Like the ultimate discussion at council will be open in open council, and the decision will be open as well. So I wouldn't be cynical. I would just interact with the process and follow through.
And we have a new council as of October. So, you know, no one can predict what's going to happen. So yeah, I would echo John that folks should participate in our process through the public information meetings, through the hearings, you know, reach out to our planning staff if there's any questions. But yeah, no, it's definitely not a done deal, either development.
Yeah. And I just say also that that our planning advisory committee, which is made up of council, hasn't even had an opportunity to make a comment about the Catherine Street investments application yet. So
that's right. That's a good point, Debbie.
They need the opportunity to be able to comment on it before assumptions can be made.
And before it moves forward or not.
Before it moves forward or not moves forward, yeah.
That's right.
When are the upcoming meetings for the development?
So I'll talk about Catherine Street first, since I was just referring to that one. So Catherine Street investments, as I had mentioned, the initial planning advisory committee meeting will be held on May 18th. I think that's Tuesday. And that meeting should be broadcast. Is that correct, Jody?
Yes. Yeah, it'll be live on our YouTube channel, which you can find directly from the homepage of our website. And
so as part of that meeting, I'll be doing the initial presentation, and then it's up to council to decide if they want to move forward with the application to a public information meeting or not. So so after it goes to planning advisory committee meeting, they make a recommendation to council. So council is held the following Wednesday night. Council either decides at that point in time if they want to hold a public information meeting about the application, or if they don't want to hold a public information meeting about the application, at which point it would be deemed refused. With the WM Fairs Architects application, it's a little bit different because we've been in this process since May of 2019. So we've had 2 public information meetings about the application. And I know there are some residents that believe those were public hearings, but they weren't public hearings. They were public information meetings. So no decisions were made about the application at those meetings. We've also had asked for first reading, and first reading has been given to the application, and that allowed us to send out questionnaires to everybody to property owners within 300 meters of the subject lands. So those questionnaires have been sent out, and I have been receiving some of them back, but I encourage the rest of the residents to also send them back. And so the next step in that would be to go back with a final staff report, but we're not at that point yet. We're still waiting for the traffic impact study to be accepted by Nova Scotia Transportation and Active Transit, and we're still negotiating with the development agreement to finalize it. So before that final staff report with the a development agreement, draft development agreement is taken to planning and advisory committee and ultimately council, there's still a little bit of work to be done. So I don't see that happening until maybe July or September, since we don't meet in August.
Yep. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
I guess our social media channels, our website, we'll have all this information. We'll have the agenda up on Friday for Tuesday's meeting, so folks can see when our planning advisory committee is.
All right. Anything?
And when do, sorry, Jody, I'm trying to remember when the staff reports get available to the public.
So the staff reports are published within 24 hours of the council meeting. So it goes up with the draft minutes, just so that because our staff reports are presented to council and then council deliberate, and maybe the recommendation that staff put forward isn't the recommendation that's accepted by council. So those reports along with the minutes give folks the whole story of what happened at the meeting. So
so following next Tuesday is PAC, so probably on Wednesday they would be available.
So yeah, Wednesday afternoon they'll probably be available when the minutes are available. And yeah, so live streamed on YouTube as well on Tuesday.
Cool. Anything else you'd like to add?
Just that, for example, with the feedback forms questionnaires that were sent out with the WM Fairs Architects application, I just wanted the residents know that those feedback forms are provided to council as part of the final staff report, and comments from the public information meetings are also included in those final staff reports. And we review our policies and take into consideration our land use policies and make a recommendation based on our land use policies.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me this morning, making time. And
Thank you, Pat.
I'll be following this closely, as I'm sure many residents will be.
That's great. Thank you.
Pat, could I mention one other thing?
Okay, go ahead.
The final staff report after is given to a planning advisory committee. There's a public hearing, so there's still one more opportunity for the public to participate with the WM Fairs Architects application. In addition to the feedback forms, there's a public hearing, and after the public hearing is when council will either refuse or approve the application.
All right.
So there is still one more public meeting where people can participate.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
Thank
Have
you,
yourselves
Pat.
a great day.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Okay,
You too.
too.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.